Good evening, councillors and members of the committee. Well done getting here despite the wet weather. As you can see, Councillor Pat Frost is not here, so I'm standing in as Vice Chairman. So we start off with informal questions, but I don't think we have any. No. So if we can start the meeting proper. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of November 15, which have been laid on the table for half an hour before the meeting. Are they accepted? Fiona, apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had apologies from Councillors Pat Frost and Chris Story and Alan Binfield from the Tenants Panel. We have no substitutes. The only other members who aren't here are Peter Martin and Ross Welland, and they may join us later.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, are there any?
None, Chairman.
Questions by members of the public?
None.
Now then, let's move on then to...
I beg your pardon, I believe I did send a declaration of interest to Mr. Robin Taylor.
For which item? We'll note it, if you can tell us what it is.
To do with legislation changes affecting the private rented sector, item 12.
Right, do you own the private sector then? Or how do you have an interest and what sort is it?
My wife is a landlord in the borough. So she private rented sector. Tent it for the avoidance of doubt.
Yeah, well, I'm not quite sure whether it is an interest you have to declare actually, but you've noted, we'll note what you say. Right, let's move on to the committee work programme 15-16. You'll find that on pages 9 to 14. And we have in front of us on this agenda the items that were designated to be here, and you can see the ones that, or the one that's going through to the March overview and scrutiny. Any queries or questions on the committee work programme? Right. Let us then move on to item 6, which is the review of the overview and scrutiny terms of reference and arrangements. You will see what it says there, and that the review will be presented to the March meetings, but I think there's a possibility that we may see it before then. Fiona.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the subcommittee is still aiming to present a final report to the March meetings is in order that any amendments, particularly to the Constitution, but also just for general working practices for ONS, can be picked up in time to start afresh for the next council year. There is an intention, though, to bring an interim report to the ONS committees, possibly a special meeting in February. There is also an all-member briefing about emergency planning that needs to be scheduled, so possibly those two will be brought together in one meeting. But the subcommittee does want to get some feedback from members on the outcomes of the survey and their initial findings as a result of that. So that there'll possibly be an extra meeting slotted in. Thank you, Chairman.
Any queries on that? Okay. Can we then move on to item 7, which is the local authority trading companies and new income sources update report, which is on pages 15 to 20, and I think Peter Vickers will introduce this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report, is an update report on the local authorities trading companies and new incomes sources. The committee originally saw this in November last year. Following that, an informal meeting of members and myself, Graham Clark and Sophie from legal went through to identify areas that could be progressed further. So on pages 16 and 17 there's a table of discussions and actions that resulted from that meeting. The report's recommendations are saying that which actions could be developed further at this stage. So, looking at it pragmatically, we'd say that building control is something that, within the immediacy of this next financial year, has a scope and good potential to deliver on this agenda. And also the property section, which is towards the bottom, it's the second one up on the panel on the table on page 17. And there's two items in there, there's residential and mixed. The recommendation here is that we'd be looking at developing more the industrial property going forward over the next financial year. There's complications around residential, which are covered in the exempt annex, which I think speaks for itself without going any further into that at this point in time. That's pretty much it by way of introduction.
And can I remind members that there is the pink annex, which does relate to what we're talking about. So if you try and avoid the necessity of referring to that if you can. Okay, comments. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm always dreaming on this one, but is there no way, please, that we can't lean on the government so that when we have to sell our houses on right to buy, that somehow they don't just hit the market and that people eventually can still buy them in the affordable sector? It really is soul-destroying that we lose all the money. We haven't money then to build another house. And neither does anybody else have the opportunity of having the affordable housing. I just wish we could do something about it, please.
Well, I did raise with the officers the fact that my Bush Telegraph tells me that Guildford are looking into a local authority housing company, which is very similar. For those of us who've been on the council for a while, we had one, which has now gone defunct, and to whether or not this would be possible for this council. But perhaps Peter would like to answer why it really doesn't apply so much with us.
Thank you, Chair. The underlying, I suppose the underlying considerations are that for us to pursue a local authority housing agenda on a private basis, we would need a considerable amount of land in which to make the whole venture viable. Within this borough, we don't have that kind of land available. The upshot of it is it would have to be done outside of the housing account, and we just haven't got that level of resource available to us in terms of land.
Chairman, just to comment a little bit further on Councillor Wheatley's question, I think the first thing is that the council, Waverley, has been making representations to government about our concerns about the some of the negative impacts from their latest proposals. Waverley also has an explicit priority to support more affordable housing, and we've rehearsed many times at this meeting that without affordable housing, one of the consequences we are already feeling and will feel more is that key people in essential jobs will not be here to deliver those jobs, because nurses, care workers, teachers need affordable housing, and people on a basic salary cannot afford to purchase a house in Waverley, and the private sector is very constrained in the borough. It's expensive, but also limited supply. So affordable housing needs to be part of the mix to sustain things going forward. And we will look at every option we can. We'll be as creative as we can. We'll work in partnership with others to achieve it. We will think creatively about how we can make our money go further. We're very lucky. We have a very driven team led by Jane Abraham over here, and they've been very successful in attracting external funding to help put against our funding, and increasingly working in partnership with others. So we are as determined as ever, despite this latest challenge.
Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at building control, I was under the impression, or hopefully not mistaken, that building control had to break even over a 3-year period. It didn't make a profit, didn't make a loss. Therefore, are the rules going to have to change there? And really what we want to see is building control in on some of the larger schemes, which is not what is happening at the moment. You know, you think of the large schemes that we have possibly in Waverley, and those developers will have their own building control expertise, and we'll miss out on all the good stuff. I just wonder if I'm right in the 3-year period, whether the rules have to change on that, or where we are with building control, because it's something I'm interested in, flagged up before.
Peter, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Isherwood is correct that building control does have to break even on a 3 to 5 year, rolling 3 to 5 year basis. It doesn't mean that we couldn't expand our functions into other areas that are outside of the charging mechanism that controls that particular aspect of building control.
If I may just add to what Peter said. So what would creating an arm's length building control bring that we currently can't achieve? One is the ability to operate outside the constraint that Peter just mentioned, but also to trade across boundaries. At the moment, our building control function is focused within the boundaries of Waverley. If it set itself up as an independent body, it could potentially draw business from the wider area and trade with more commercial freedoms. Now, the issue is it's a competitive environment. We will need to take a view about whether anything that we can bring forward, our service offer, is attractive to the market as it stands.
If I may come back, Chairman. I mean, Woking, Guildford, everyone else has their own building control sections. They do meet from time to time. Their fees are very similar. Therefore, to go outside the borough, which is what we want, means that we really have to combine with other building control, borough councils, district councils, the lot, to go outside our own boundary.
And Chairman, so there is many councils in the Surrey area challenged around recruiting to their building control teams. Because there simply aren't people out there in the marketplace. When somebody leaves, often those vacancies stay as vacant. And so I think increasingly some of those councils will face a very real choice around whether they run building control at all or whether they just leave the market to provide the supply of the right building control people. Now obviously that leaves the councils, the work that the council needs for itself, they're slightly more exposed, because at least when we develop our housing, we're able to call upon our local building control expertise, which gives us greater confidence. We work with them, develop a stronger relationship, and we know we're getting good quality. But I fear that many councils will face a real choice about whether they operate a building control function at all, and whether they just leave it to the market to provide it independently.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's really good to see the list progressing to a list, which is good news since our last meeting. I find it a little difficult to consider how we might progress things, though, with the just a list. I think it'd be really helpful if we could have added to the list as it stands a crude estimate of the likely revenue each of the opportunities might generate. You know, I mean, just thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Some idea of the risk and some idea of the longevity of each of the opportunities, so that we can actually discriminate between the list. I don't know what other members think, but I certainly just struggle to, accept from a list a recommendation to go forward without knowing what that recommendation's worth. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, well, I commented that having a list is great, but to say, we consider which one we should pursue further with no recommendation or specifics is difficult. I think what we're being told is that the apart from building control and property, the others just are not practical to move forward, and therefore eliminate them at this stage because it just won't work, or the officers can see. I mean, I think one of the things we had originally was looking at the scale of some of these, for example, a local authority trading company and the sort of turnover you had to have to make it work. And clearly that was outside our, we're just a too small a council, and it's usually counties or unitary authorities that were able to do these things. I mean, we have two alternatives. Well, there'll be further speakers, but either we just decide to follow those two, or we send it all back and say put some potential income streams to all of them. But I think the officers are saying, well, if we put an income stream to lots of them, they'll either be legally no good, or they'll be financially no good, or not practical, or something. And so when I asked the question, which of these are to be recommended, that's when Peter confirmed that it was the two we've mentioned. But we'll consider that. I think somebody else wanted to speak. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do note that on the 21st of March, at our next ONS meeting, we are due on the committee work programme to receive a follow-up report on this subject. There is one other thing that I would like to draw members' attention to, and that's the local authority trading company, in particular, expanding Waverley training services. We recognised at our recent joint ONS that it was an underappreciated jewel. And I believe those were the words of Madam Chairman at that meeting. Waverley Training Services has a turnover of £2 million. Surely we can build on that, perhaps with a business relationship with a commercial company, and provide training services to other professionals. Perhaps council officers could comment, or perhaps they could investigate further. Thank you.
Yes. David Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. So Waverley Training Services, as Councillor Bolton has said, is an absolute jewel. It's a service that is proving to be highly successful, winning a number of contracts to provide primarily work-related training to enable people to get into work and enabling people to develop basic work-related skills, basic management skills and technical skills to allow them to progress their careers. So really important service. I think at this stage, it's hard to see what the advantages would be to set them up as in a different model, because they're already operating in a commercial environment, they're already winning contracts. In fact, the level of growth has been so significant that I think it's caused us to pause and say, well, actually, we need to embed some of this new practice before we grow further. At the moment, the major constraint on any further growth is going to be the building that they currently occupy. It's already at capacity, and its location is not ideal to attracting new business. It's down a side road with very limited parking and a building that doesn't do justice to the quality of services that are provided. And so I think probably the key, if there is a key, to enable the next stage in its development would be to look at its location. And I know that officers are already beginning to explore other possibilities that may give it a stronger platform for the future. But at the moment, that service is not constrained for future growth other than their current location.
If I can come back, that sounds as though an excellent opportunity to invest to grow. Buy a new building, recruit more staff, and so on.
But it then begs the question whether we need a local authority trading company or just to develop it the way you've just described.
I think the local authority trading company in this point is possibly a red herring, but it does seem as though we could beef it up, beef up the service.
Councillor Hess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To emphasise that point, what we need is the money. The formal structure that enables us to do that comes after that fact. however, if I can come to the questions I wanted to ask, and I acknowledge that my thunder has been largely stolen by the preceding speakers, but I would like to just go through some basic points to check the form of the advice that the officers expect this committee to give. Other than it, I mean, I assume you want a bit more than just a nod from us. My second question is, could you tell me what product will be generated as a result of any endorsement that we give? What will that enable the officers to produce? And I'm thinking in terms of some sort of straw man paper or even an outline business case for how we are going to invest our resources in order to generate some revenue-generating schemes. And thirdly, can I just have confirmation that is the responsible officer Graham Clark? Right, lovely, okay. In fact, I have got some more questions, but can I just have answers to those 3 questions, please?
My understanding is that we're being asked today to whittle down the list to those items that we're going to ask further work to be done upon. So in other words, if we agree these 2, then we'll get further work on them with some sort of business plan of how this could generate more income, the risks, the opportunities, and an in-depth look. But we don't want to do that on ones that are dead ducks before they start. So that's my understanding, but the officers Peter will confirm that I've got that right or not.
Yes, Chairman. Just confirm that Graham Clark will lead on this, and also your prediction is exactly what recommendations are saying here. So it's just to narrow it down to either what's recommended there, or if any, to progress further in terms of developing it into business cases or whatever the form is that the committee would like to see.
I would just make the comment, and possibly I should have sent this question in advance of the meeting. In fact, I should definitely have done that. So forgive me, but I would be very sorry if training was allowed to fall off the list, purely because it's being considered as whether it has to be an LATC. I'm not entirely convinced. Well, anyway, I think we may need a bit more material to scrutinise in order to come up with an informed decision. Is there any scope for getting some more considered data information to consider, please?
The recommendations on property and building control are very pragmatic in the point of view that these are things we can physically deliver and get results on in the coming year, and that will deliver financially for us. Going through the rest of the list, it's either very small change in some of the proposals there, so the effort put into that, it'll pretty much come out of next year anyway, certainly on the housing issue in the first box. And some of these headings are very in-depth, such as review of core function. It's a long way away, and it's a huge exercise to do. It isn't something that's pragmatically going to deliver for us next year, and putting numbers to that at this point is, well, it's not really going to be of much use for any of us, to be fair. There's too much detail to get into to be able to put that kind of substance to it. So the point of saying building control and property is it's something we can actually get hold of and progress and deliver on in the next financial year.
Okay, it's being suggested that at this stage, and it doesn't of course mean that in 6 months' time we can't bring any of these things forward, but it's being suggested that building control and property, residential plus mixed, are the 2 items we should be asking the officers to do further work on and come back to us at our next meeting in March.
Certainly would like to add Waverley Training Services. In particular, I think it should be quantifiable. We invest so much money and we expand the business by so much. Thank you.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we put 3 forward at this stage. All right. Councillor Isherwood.
I presume that means, I'm sure the officers will soon correct me, the idea of providing a payroll service to other councils doesn't generate the income that one would anticipate.
The simple answer is yes.
Thank you.
And if I could just comment, there's absolutely no clue here, at least not that I can find, that this is in any way time constrained. So if training isn't a tomorrow thing, I would be very unhappy if it got knocked off the list, because it's definitely out there and at some time, needs to be exploited. Equally, I'm just a bit unhappy about the fact that I can't see an action in any of the actions that are listed in the column called action, which is puzzling me. There's no indication of the time bounding. I don't feel I've got any information here, which is why I'm asking for more detailed information on which I can make an informed decision. I'm just not happy the way this has been presented.
My perception is, and I have to apologise that I'm not directly involved in this work, is that the group that looked at this looked very broad, very broad, and tried to tease out where there may be some scope. And we simply don't have the resources to look at everything in depth. And so I think what the discussion here is about is if we want to look at something in depth in the very near future, where should we focus our attention? I don't think that in any way removes any of the items from the list permanently. If in 6 months' time you want to go back and look at another one in a bit more detail, maybe legislation's changed, the market's changed, new opportunities arise, it's not taking it off completely. It's saying, where should we invest the attention to start with? Because if we try and do it all, we'll end up achieving nothing. So let's focus on those things that we think is likely to generate a quicker return on our efforts.
Right, who has a proposal? I think the officers are suggesting that if we're going to be effective, we narrow it to 2 and do some work on that, and then put all the others, if you like, on suspended animation, and they could be coming back later. Or do we want to put 3 up at this stage, although you may get a pretty short report on the 3rd one, just to say, we can't do much on it now because we've got to improve the premises and we've got to do this, which is a longer term project.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to propose the 3 of them, recognising that the 3rd may be a longer term matter. I'm concerned that if we only suggest 2 and in 6 months' time we come back with the 3rd, there may be an element of procrastination at that time. So I would like to keep it on the agenda, please. Okay,
you're proposing the 3. Have we a seconder for that? Councillor Isherwood, Councillor Fraser. Okay, all those in favour of those 3 coming back for further information? Yeah, that's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Blagden, it's nice to see you. Wasn't aware that you were substituting. Are you substituting or just coming to observe?
Mr. Chairman, I'm actually substituting, but I had to go through the list very carefully to try and find out who I was substituting, because it wasn't as if the entire fleet of people on the paper had turned up for action tonight.
So,
incidentally, I apologise for being late.
No. Well, I wasn't expecting you. That's the only reason I've raised it. You're substituting for Councillor Story or Councillor Frost? Because I think the normal thing of substitutions you are substituting specifically for a person.
Yes.
Rather than just turn up and hope someone's not here so you can join in the affray. If the communication's gone wrong, then I apologise, but I don't think...
I think you're correct on this one and I am not.
Okay, well, we'll be lenient and let you take part if you wish, but probably can't vote. Right, okay, let's move on to the next item. And the next item is the complaints handling in Waverley 2014-15, which is on pages 21 to 28. Sue Petzold will be dealing with this item, and I think has handed round an amended complaints Annex 1 for you. Sue.
Yes, apologies for needing to table a revised statistics, but we had trouble with IT. It's a relatively short report, and really I think I just need to draw your attention to a few aspects. Firstly, a welcome decrease in the number of level 1 complaints, which we think is partly due to better performance in housing, leading to quite a reduction of housing complaints at level 1. There has been an increase in level 2 complaints, and it's difficult to assess why that has happened, but it may well be that complaints in 2014-15 were more persistent, but also quite a number of the planning complaints generally start off at level 2 rather than going to level 1 in the first instance, partly because they're quite complex, and also the head of planning's taken the view that really that there is an answer to be given, and it might as well be given at level 2. So it might be an explanation of the slight increase there. Good news in that the performance in dealing with complaints within the council's target timescales of 10 working days for level 1 and 15 working days for level 2 and level 3 has improved from 71% the previous year to 79% in 2014-15. And I think we're on course to improve further on that figure. Unfortunately, there's no information on whether the percentage or number of complaints that were upheld or partly upheld. We've had quite a lot of problems with our complaints database, and we are currently having our IT build a new database, which I think, well, I'm hoping will be much more fit for purpose than the current computer software that we use. So I think that's just about it, really, in terms of the headlines of the report.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your report, which is difficult to prepare when you haven't got the IT to back you up, which is not your problem. Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure it must have come as a report, having found its way onto the front of the Surrey Advertiser. Are we able to be assured, please, that such occurrences cannot happen again, that when somebody is being decanted and their belongings are put in a garage, that somebody is informed and that the garage is not allowed to be emptied with the poor person losing their life's memories? Thank you.
Okay, well, we don't want to refer to individual cases in public. The principle, yes.
Chairman, you took the words out of my mouth. Of course, we can't comment about individual cases at the committee. What's very important, though, is when we receive complaints, we make sure that we understand what happened. And if things have gone wrong, we make absolutely sure that the right measures are put in place to prevent them happening again. And that is part of the way that we work.
Councillor Fraser.
Written and oral questions submitted to the Western Area Planning Committee very often are given very short shrift. There's an apparent lack of patience and tolerance there. Very often these questions do deserve a detailed answer, and too frequently they do not get a detailed answer. They get a half-humorous put-down. I'm hoping that clause 4 doesn't cover measures to stop people persisting in asking questions when they don't get a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, I think we're looking at persistent complainants rather than persistent questioners, but they could be the same person, I suppose, if you can persistently complain that you're not getting your persistent questions answered. But we can, I don't know if Sue, you've got anything to say on that?
Yes, that's exactly right, as the Chairman has just said. This standalone policy is to help us deal with people who have been through the complaints process, and then their next port of call is the Ombudsman, but they don't want to take that step and they carry on going. And it's quite difficult sometimes to manage how we look at their complaint, and we have to continue to review the fact that they are not raising new issues. And so that's a mechanism for dealing with complainants. But I think that the issue that you're talking about is quite different from that, and that's a completely different question of asking questions at planning committees. Two different things.
I accept your reassurance, Madam. Thank you very much. The measures taken here against persistent complainants, not persistent questioners. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little concerned about the selective nature of the recommendation, which welcomes reduction in level 1 complaints, which I acknowledge, although they are still higher than where they were a year or so ago, but doesn't mention the increase in level 2 and 3 complaints. And I would prefer an addendum, a change to the recommendation. Yes, we welcome the reduction in level 1, but are disappointed at the increase in levels 2 and 3. And we don't seem to have any generally accepted reason for that increase. I'm also concerned that some of the lessons to be learnt in the Annex 2 don't seem to me to be automatically lessons. They do seem to represent, regrettably, council officers not doing their job. And I'm disappointed. Thank you.
Yes, another point that I wanted to raise is the recommendation refers to the work undertaken by the Foresight Group, and saying that that's believed to be having an improvement on the complaints, but I'm not aware that we've had any report from the Foresight Group, and I haven't a clue what therefore the work they're doing. Have suggested that perhaps in our forward programme in the autumn, I'm told it could be done, that we have a report on the Foresight Group, so we have a better understanding about what they're about. So I think that should be put into the recommendation as well, asking for a report from the Foresight Group. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chairman. I totally agree with Councillor Bolton's observation that homing in on the success of reducing level 1 complaints at the expense of not flagging the level 2 deterioration is probably somewhat remiss in terms of the importance of this report. We're asked to make observations to be passed on to the executive, and I think the key thing that's come out of this, which has been flagged, is that the IT is not up to delivering the information that's needed. So I think an observation would be that as a matter of urgency, the database should be fixed so that the analysis that's required to understand why level 2 is going up and where the problems actually lie would be very welcome. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, and the IT also needs to tell us how many of the complaints have been upheld and how many are not, because you can have vexatious complainants who keep complaining and are always actually not upheld. So I think we've got a recommendation which we've amended, which welcomes the reduction in level 1 complaints, deals with the level 2 disappointment therein, asks for the Foresight Group to report to overview this committee in the autumn, and also to comment about the IT systems to enable the officers to be able to give us all the information that we require in future. I understand it'll take a few, they're working hard at it, but it doesn't hurt to say that we want this sorted out as soon as possible. Councillor Hess.
Paragraph 8 is a bit ambiguous. I'm unclear reading this if the issue is the fact that the database is not up to speed and is not capable of holding the richness of data that's required, or whether the lack is due to data input. Is it the software or the use of the software that's the issue here? Can anyone tell me?
Primarily it's the software. We're using a database which is actually been built for freedom of information request handling, and we've tried to modify it for complaints handling. It is very complicated. It's got multi-layers, and basically we're looking at introducing or building a new, much simpler system which will give us the information that we want to report to yourselves.
So it's the IT.
Yeah.
Come back.
Can we just have a bit more detail, just to give some substance? I mean, it sounds like this is a centrally mandated. If you're invoking FOI and trying to conform with FOI, which is very much central government driven, and therefore you're getting into the realm of a legal requirement to adopt. I think we're heading into that area. I'd like to know a bit more about what sort of nonsensical software we are labouring under, please.
Probably Sue's not the expert on the software. Say if she's a user and it doesn't supply the information she wants. I think we just need to comment to the executive that money's got to be spent to put it right so that we can get the information that we want.
But the software will have a name. I'd be interested to know what package it is we're talking about here.
If I can help, Chairman.
Because we can't be the only one suffering.
The new system that is being looked at will be developed in SharePoint, which is our kind of core document and information management system. We have a product already that's been developed in SharePoint that we use for the Freedom of Information Act requests. That was designed specifically for that purpose, and the intention is to develop a new system specifically to manage complaints.
I don't want this to turn into an IT quiz where 90% of us don't understand what we're talking about, but you obviously do. Councillor Hess?
Well, again, if I can have assurance that you'll give me the name of this software. I mean, anything that's bespoke is highly dangerous. I'd be curious to know exactly where we're heading on this one, please.
Further discussion offline, probably, but the recommendation will clearly include that we want this sorted out, whatever it is that we need sorting out in the IT field. So, have we got that, Fiona? Yeah. Is everyone happy with the amended recommendations we're going to put forward? Good. We now move on to the complaints about Waverley's service received by the local ombudsman, which seems to me good news, and that's Sue.
Yes, it is good news. This report summarises the complaints that have been received by the local government ombudsman about Waverley services, and also the complaints that have gone to the housing ombudsman service. With complaints about tenants matters, anything to do with landlord services now is looked at by the housing ombudsman service. For the last 2 years, that's been the case. So no complaints were upheld by the local government ombudsman about Waverley's services in 2014-15. And as far as the housing complaints are concerned, one complaint was looked at by the recently formed designated tenants panel, which is a new stage in the complaints process whereby a housing complainant who's completed the council's complaints procedure can actually ask for their complaint to be reviewed by a designated person, and most of the time that designated person will be the designated panel here in Waverley. And that one complaint that was looked at by the designated tenants panel was actually resolved. It was about damp, and the work was carried out at the end of the process, and the complainant received compensation for damage to her possessions caused by mould and damp. And then finally, there was one complaint that was looked at by the Housing Ombudsman Service. They took so long to come to a decision on it that we'd actually completed our investigations and recommended compensation to the complainant and installed soundproofing. So by the time they had actually started to look at it, we'd actually resolved the complaint locally. And they agreed that we'd done the right thing.
Comments? I think we have a recommendation. I would have thought we would comment that we're pleased with the outcome, because I think to have no complaints to the Ombudsman, the General Ombudsman, upheld is very good news. Okay, let's agree. We now move on to item 10, where we have the minutes of the Housing Improvement Subcommittee, which are there for your information. Any comments upon that? I mean, the subcommittee is working hard on the voids, which are improving, but we've got a long way to go. And the officers are aware of that, and we're basically putting it on the agenda every time now, so that it's given a suitable priority. Okay, any comments? Councillor Wheatley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered whether the Help to Move scheme, especially helping older people downsize, whether that is also gathering momentum, which hopefully might also affect the vacant properties, etc.
Easy Move, I think you're talking
yes,
about.
Yes, absolutely. Easy Move is still continuing to meet its targets, and we're hoping that funding will be available for next year so that we continue to do that. And obviously that, as you say, that brings family homes back, which is absolutely what we need. So thank you.
Councillor Bolton?
We must make those targets more ambitious if they're continuing to meet them.
You are a taskmaster, aren't you?
We're so pleased with the service, the positive impact it's having, that we've even got a video sort of promoting the work of the staff. And so if there's an opportunity in the future to share that with the committee, we'll happily do that.
Good. Councillor Hess?
I hate to stick my head above the parapet. I thought we were going to take some sort of vote on whether we approve the recommendation. It's obviously happened now, but I'd just like to be recorded that I don't agree with that recommendation, please. And I apologise.
On the previous matter?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So coming back to this one again, Housing Subcommittee, noted. Thanks very much. Move on to item 11, which is the Housing Development Update, which is on, starts at page 43. I think Jane Abraham's going to run through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report is to update you on the progress that's been made on housing development in 2015. We remain committed to delivering an affordable housing programme, particularly new homes for rent, and especially when the government's priorities are starting to lean more towards home ownership. So we completed 7 new homes in Badgers Close and Warren Road in Farncombe, and 2 homes in Hullmead. They're completed. We've got build contractors on site across the borough, and the sites are listed in the report, and that'll deliver 26 new affordable homes. And then we've got a number of schemes in the pipeline, so either at planning stage or at concept design stage, and they'll deliver a further 33 homes. We've had some a lot of positive feedback from the new tenants, and we'll be surveying them again when they've been in their new homes for 12 months using the survey form that's in Appendix 3. We use that currently to survey housing association tenants when they've been living in their new homes, and we use that feedback that we got from those those surveys to inform our design standards and our new build programme. So I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Councillor Wheatley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to congratulate our council on this work. I had the privilege, dare I say, of digging the first sod for Warren Road and Badgers Close developments, which are both in my ward. That they're beautiful homes, and that if that's the standard of affordable housing that we're delivering, I think that it's fantastic, and I just hope the programme goes forward apace. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I regret that there's a tiny error on page 47, and I must defend my ward. The Station Road development is not in Farncombe and Cattersull, it's in Central and Oxford. And I also look forward to the wonderful developments that are expressed, listed on page 48, which are correctly listed as being in Central and Oxford.
Good. And of course, I did raise the question, of course, we've got the new housing bill going through, and I understand this shouldn't affect the forward stuff that's down here, but where I know we're going to be having a report during the course of the year as to how the new housing bill could affect our future building of housing development. But that's for another day. So, note the report with thanks. With the appropriate correction. I'm just moving Station Road, that's all, from one part of the borough to another. Good. Okay, thank you very much. Let us then move on to item 12, which is legislation changes affecting the private rented sector, which is on pages 57 to 66. Jane Abraham again.
Thank you, Chairman. There are 4 pieces of legislation, or 4 changes that this report covers. There's a new scheme in place requiring letting agents to belong to a redress scheme so that they, for dealing with complaints, and the local authority will be able to charge a penalty for non-compliance if those letting agents don't join a redress scheme. The second piece of legislation is to prevent landlords responding to legitimate complainants by serving them with eviction notices. And we've got enforcement procedures in place, and this will be added to those enforcement procedures to ensure we can take the necessary action. There are new regulations on smoke and carbon monoxide alarms being put into private rented properties, and the regulations again place enforcement duties on the council, so we need to amend our scheme of delegation to enable us to act on those new provisions and to set a penalty charge. And then the fourth piece of legislation is in the Energy Act. The provisions mean that landlords aren't able to reasonably turn down requests from tenants from April if they want to make energy efficiency improvements in their property. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions, comments? Well, thank you very much. Noted. Thank you. It's really an information item more than anything else. So thank you for that. And we now move on to item 13, which is the community room review, which has been before this committee more than once, but we now have an up-to-date report. Jane.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, we've reviewed the 13 community rooms that we own as part of our housing asset, and among those 13, 4 are currently underused and have potential for conversion to additional affordable homes. So this report sets out a timetable as to how we'll bring those forward for conversion. It takes into account, and I want to take into account then the views of this Overview and Scrutiny Committee to take a paper to the Executive to seek approval to progress this community room conversions, to seek planning permission and procure a build contractor to enable us to meet the timetable that's set out on page 70. Thank you.
Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm just going to say, looking at para 3.2, you know, on the 4 that we're talking about, income £90, expenditure £5,591. I mean, if we look at spend save on these conversions, if you take Woodger's Close as an example, at the current operating loss, over the 15 years payback period, we're actually going to spend £35,729. I would have thought that came into the equation somewhere. you know, and one can't assume that the loss is going to continue at that rate, but might well accelerate. Therefore, I totally support the scheme.
As the councillor for that covers Woodges Close, the sooner it happens, the better, so far as I'm concerned. We're still waiting, I think, for Wonersh Parish Council to comment, but I mean, I think all four should be pursued. But Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm a newcomer to this council, but I have to confess that for the last 30 years I have lived within 100 yards of Gorselands in Alma Lane, Farnham, and did not know that the hall there was a community facility. And judging by the figures on the profit side, income side, for the whole 13, I get the impression there's a lot of other people in the same situation as myself. I wonder whether these rooms are advertised as being for community use and not just for the residents of the sheltered housing adjacents. That's my first point. The second one I would like to broach, please, is the consultation. The most important aspect of the consultation is consulting with the residents of the sheltered housing adjacent to the Gorseland Community Room, and I'm assured by Councillor Hodge that that has been done. But the consultation of ward councillors has not been adequately done. Councillor Hodge for Upper Hale, for Hale and Heath End, was consulted, but his fellow councillor, albeit a Farnham town councillor, Mike Hyman, has heard nothing about it at all. And I find that I'm in the same position with Upper Hale, the boundary of which passes adjacent to Gorselands. Whilst I'm sure Councillor Potts knew all about it, Councillor Fraser most certainly hadn't heard a thing until he read it in the agenda. And I'm not making more than a mild complaint about the consultation process.
Well, I think the consultation was to Waverley Borough councillors rather than town councillors, but then the town council's being consulted as a town council in its entirety. And you can see on the top of page 70 that the updated comments from the town council are awaited.
It's because I don't think they've actually noted they've got the information.
Well, I don't know. Well, let's... Jane Abraham.
I've emailed the clerk, and then I emailed the clerk again this week. So I've emailed the clerk to ask for their comments, just like I've emailed the clerk of Wonersh and Dunsfold and Godalming Town Council, for them to then take it to their town councillors, either through a meeting or via an email, in order that you have got an opportunity to say for us to seek your views.
Well, I apologise, but it seems that hasn't happened. The matter hasn't been brought before the town council, and none of us knew about it.
Well, our officer is saying she's done it. Now, she can't complain about what happens the other end, which is the town council. I suggest you have words with the clerk at the town council, but if our officer says she's done it, then she's done it.
Going back to my first point, before we depart, please.
Yes, well, the first point, I suppose, if you didn't know it exists, you won't worry about it
I'm
not
wondering
existing.
whether we could not do more with the remaining 9 community rooms to make it more apparent to the local residents of the area that these community rooms are available.
Okay, that's the other 9, so...
Yes, absolutely, because I think that's the point. There were 4 that were identified as suitable with potential for conversion, and we're progressing with those, and then we'll look at the others in terms of what we do to try and promote their use for community groups or for the local community, if we're going to decide to keep them in the longer term, because obviously, as you can see from the income and expenditure, we want to ensure if we're spending money out on them that we're getting income in from them, making the best use of our assets. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hess.
Just to give me some confidence in the figures, could I just ask, the payback period that's given would seem, on the basis of the information provided, to be the payback of the build cost. what is the through life cost of that property over the period of the 24 years, and how does that change the payback date?
Extend the payback date, but I haven't got that figure here to include, so sorry.
So the payback date is misleading at the very least, and a very odd figure to be shown to the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee. Should we defer a final judgment until we have that information, or do we consider it to be not sufficiently significant?
The answer is we're going to make some money out of these places rather than just continually throwing money down the proverbial plug hole. And I know, for example, on the Wannish one, I've never seen anybody in it, ever. And it can make a council house, and we can get an affordable council house in an area where there are other council houses. It's a plus for the village, regardless of the cost, to be honest. But at least we're going to turn around something that's losing for Wannish £2,400 roughly, and instead we're going to get some rent. And I suppose you can say it's like for all our affordable housing payback periods. I mean, payback period for Oxford Ridge, I suspect, will never going to happen. But we're going to have some decent housing, which is the criteria that's most important, I would have thought.
And if I could just say that I support the thrust of the proposal entirely. I'm just unsettled at being asked to make a decision on the basis of faulty data. It's just, why are we being shown that payback period when it can be easily proven that is immediately wrong? It's a shame to compromise what we're trying to do here with the low quality of information provided.
Councillor Hall?
Yeah, payback isn't supposed to be in-depth financial analysis. It's a very fast and dirty way of seeing when you get your money back. It's not supposed to encompass all costs. It's supposed to give you a simple indication. That's all it's supposed to be.
Well, it's simple enough for me to understand, just about. Councillor Bolton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is an excellent proposal. The average cost of the 5 dwellings that will result from the 4 community rooms is £70,000. They are also, which is far cheaper than building a new council house. They are also small dwellings and will be an excellent opportunity for people to downsize, thus releasing a larger council house.
Good. Right, we have a proposal that we proceed in accordance with the next steps timetable in paragraph 6. Are we happy to endorse the recommendation to the executive that this work gets done, subject to the 2 parish councils, or the town and the parish council? Is it agreed? Good, thank you. We now move on to the Waverley Family Support Team Progress Report, and I think Hugh is going to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Waverley Family Support is one of 6 teams across Surrey delivering the government's Troubled Families programme. It's funded partly through the Housing Revenue Account and through central government money via Surrey County Council. An element of the grant is payment by results money, i.e. targets have got to be met. The aim of the team is to turn around the lives of families with multiple and complex needs. We receive referrals from social services, education, the police, housing, and there can be self-referrals as well. If our families are acceptable in the programme, they receive intensive support by a family coordinator, and this could be up to 6 to 8 weeks. And this can be very practical support in terms of helping children get out of bed to get to school, to actually complex work, negotiating school places for children with special needs. So there's a whole range of skills that are required. It's very professional, there are processes in place, and detailed record taking record recording is in place. In the case studies in Annex 2 demonstrates the outcomes being achieved. Families being removed from child protection plans, we're avoiding evictions, avoiding homelessness, employment, people being put in employment, and children in education. The data in Annex 1 is for the first 6 months of this financial year, and it gives some kind of trends in relation to the housing tenure. For example, the majority of the people that are supported are council tenants. There is a high percentage of families from Godalming, and it really confirms some of the issues that the team are being tackled. So really, in conclusion, I ask the committee to note the report and comment on the achievements of the family support team.
Councillor Wheatley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, because of my ward, my area, I am very grateful to the team for all this work. No doubt, I'm sure you work with the local schools, because I know the primary school of which I'm a governor also has its support team. Even if that means merely phoning the household, as you say, to ensure that people are stirred to get moving and do whatever they have to do with the day. It's sad to admit that we need such support, but we do, and I'm very grateful that this is in place. Thank you.
Can I just make the point that Annex 2 is pink, so we don't want to refer to any of those specific cases, and also anecdotes of cases in your own ward is not going to be helpful here because it could be identified, so please make quite sure we don't refer to any individuals. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chairman. I find both the concept and the achievements of the family support team an outstanding example of good practice. This is such a constructive way of helping our challenged families. In relation to the report, though, I wonder if officers have the data to add to the report a comment about the geographical reach and effectiveness of the scheme. I note from the annex that the analysis focuses on the larger settlements, or that the data is coming from the larger settlements, and that Oldfold's the only village with due respect to Cranley's larger village status, that features in the graphs. So, rural life generates its own quota of family problems, and it would be useful to know if the problems from the smaller settlements are actually getting referred and being tackled. Thank you, Chairman.
Here.
So we can provide some more drilling down of information. I think the Chair is going to ask for some more data in terms of outcomes, so we can incorporate that data in terms of the detail around the support in the villages.
Yes, when I read the report, I mean, it's good news, and we're told, we get paid by outcomes, but where are the statistics on our outcomes? We had 81 cases. Were they all successful? What percentage were successful? And I do think we have the IT to actually provide this on this occasion. And it seems to me, therefore, that would be helpful. And I don't understand, and I've mentioned this to Hugh, at the bottom of page 83, the last sentence says, the team are now seeing an emerging trend in Waverley tenants receiving intensive support as highlighted in Annex 1. Well, if you can find trends in Annex 1 where there's no comparisons at all, I was mystified by that personally, and therefore I suggested that we might ask for an updated report on this so that we know the outcomes. I know the money is largely coming from the County Council, but our officer time is there, and I think outcomes in some form is useful so that we can compare it in a year's time to outcomes then. And therefore, if the committee agree, I was going to suggest that we ask for an analysis of outcomes, and also whatever these emerging trends are, it would be helpful to know what they are, because I'm certainly not bright enough to work them out from Annex 1. And we can then incorporate Councillor Seaborn's request that we drill down a bit. It may be some villages have no families at all, but so it's the perfect village with no complex problems at all. And why is it Godalming now overtaken Farnham? Is there anything in our housing stock or some lessons we can learn as to, have we done something brilliant in Farnham, or have we got more problems in Godalming? I don't know which way round it is. Councillor Hess.
I'm going to get thrown out of this, right? I just noticed under adult functioning issues, and I must say the title, I hadn't associated adult functions with that list. But anyway, offending behaviour, there seems to have been 0 cases. I'm aware of 1, certainly. Quite high profile, made the papers. So, again, there seems to be some gap between the data and the experience. Is anyone else?
Well, it may be that they weren't one of the families that were helped, or they may not have been part of the scheme. I presume the stuff in Annex 1 relates to the 81 families that have been looked after in this period.
So I think that's what perhaps when we come back, is clarify that these are cases that have been closed in terms of the family support and not live. So it's about that snapshot of what data you're actually looking at. So it may not capture specific cases people would expect in there. But I think if we were tighter in terms of clarifying what data is, and for what period and for what, i.e. these are cases that have now been dealt with and passed on, I think that would help clarify that issue.
Good. Councillor Isherwood.
Just taking on the point Councillor Hess makes, I think we will discuss this out of the committee because there is one very serious case that isn't recorded. Very serious.
We'll take that one. Any specific cases we need to take offline. And I would suggest that our recommendation is, we're pleased to note, I think, the progress and achievements of the family support team, but now ask for further information concerning outcomes and statistics on outcomes, and also incorporating other places apart from the major, so that Bramley can get a mention in some way or other. Unless it may be that the only places where this is happening are these places, and that all other places not mentioned have not, in this period, have had any necessity of assistance. I think, okay, so, and you can do it by when, next meeting, the analysis? Okay, so it's agreed that the next meeting will have the analysis of the outcomes. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. We now come to item 15, which is the domestic abuse policy, which is on pages 95 to 108, and Jane Abraham will deal with this item.
Thank you, Chairman. This policy provides a clear statement of how we respond to customers who are experiencing domestic violence and ensure that they receive a consistent and sensitive response. This is an updated policy set into the new template, and it's been set up, developed in consultation with both internal and external stakeholders. It takes into account current legislation, changes in our outreach services, and lessons learnt from recent domestic homicide reviews. A detailed procedure note is also in place for staff so they know how to apply the policy. Thank you.
Good. So this is not a new policy, it's an update, but because it's in a new format, it's difficult to do any tracking to see where it's changed, but it's largely been changed to bring it up to date with current legislation, but the ethos of the whole thing has not changed. Any questions or comments? Okay. New policy noted, and we recommend it, to the executive? Yep, agree. Thank you. Right, we now move on to the exciting subject of Treasury Management Framework 1617, which Peter Vickers is going to enlighten us about.
Thank you, Chairman. So a slight change of topic from housing and housing-related issues, something far more exciting. So the agenda item 16 is the Treasury Management Framework 2016-17. This report concerns the management of the Council's investments and cash flow, money market transactions, and the effective control of the risks associated with those activities. The Council complies with the Code of Practice on Treasury Management, which is just known as the Code, and it's produced by SIPFA. The purpose of the Code is explained on pages 110 and 11. It's quite succinct. The key documents that are required within the framework to be approved by the Council annually are in the annexes, so I'll just go through those with you. There's the Treasury Management Policy Statement, which is Annex 1. It sets out the headline objectives of Treasury Management. The Council's primary objective in relation to investments is the security of the capital invested, followed by liquidity, and then the yield earned on the investments, which is the main gist of the policy statement. The Treasury Management Strategy 2016 is included in Annex 2, setting out the way in which the policy in Annex 1 will be achieved. So the strategy in Annex 2 addresses investment risk, and the key part of that is on page 115, and it focuses on credit ratings, generally shorter fixed-term investments in sterling, and potentially investments in property, which we've touched on this evening already. The third document is the Annual Investment Strategy for 2016-17, which is in Annex 3, and this sets out how the Council's investments will be managed, translating the Treasury Management Strategy into an operating strategy which effectively specifies the limits to ratings, the maximum investment levels in any particular institution. The last document within the framework is the prudential indicators, which are given in Annex 4. The Local Government Act 2003 requires the Council to comply with SIPFA's Prudential Borrowing Code, which requires local authorities to agree a specified set of prudential indicators to borrow to support decision making and setting and measuring performance targets. So effectively, there's no proposed changes to the policy for this particular year. It's something we have to do annually, is to review the policy and make adjustments where necessary. So the committee is asked to endorse the framework to the executive. So I'm just open to questions.
Questions or comments? Remembering that this is the same we've had in previous years, certainly the same as last year. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Am I correct in saying, just from reading this, the main risks you run in the Treasury is counterparty risk?
It pretty much is the case, yes. We don't go below AAA in our investments.
And the range of products you're permitted to invest in are purely money market depot instruments, no derivatives, forwards, anything like that?
Yes, correct. It's just that.
Thanks.
I knew the financial wizards would all come out. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It may be exciting, but it also governs our control of many millions of pounds. I only have two minor queries. The first is on page 120 at the top. The present arrangements have been agreed with the portfolio holder of finance and so on in March 2010. I just wondered whether we could have perhaps a review or an update of that matter. I'm sure the portfolio holder of finance is no longer, at the time, is no longer in place. But my other query was more general. It was concerning Annex 4. Much of this information is fairly new to me, and I wonder if we could have an education session, a little bit of enlightenment outside this meeting.
Okay, so on both. First of all, the present arrangements are still extant as of now, and Councillor Wyatt Ramsdale is up to date and involved in these arrangements in treasury management, and you're very welcome to come in and go through the detail of the TMPs when it's convenient.
Councillor Seaborn.
a minor point along the same vein, with reference to TMP 9 on page 121 about money laundering. It states the arrangements have been agreed by the Audit Committee. I think it'd just be useful to add when the Audit Committee agreed, so that we know when the Audit Committee's agreement might be past its sell-by date. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Okay, well, there's an offer for those that want to know more about this exciting subject to have a private tutorial with Peter Vickers. Subject to that, are we happy that we recommend, endorse this framework to the executive? Thank you very much. We now move on to item 17, which is a recommendation as printed in the name of the chairman, but I'm going to propose it as set out. Is that agreed? Agreed. So we're now excluding the public and press from the meeting.